time in 1844, probably at the time of the annual autumn meeting of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club, four Scottish gentlemen, famously now today, challenged each other to a two-ball foursome match on the links at St. Andrews. 3 years later, the painting was, their match was commemorated in this painting by Charles Lees. Lees was a respected, but not at that time widely known Scottish painter. He'd actually grown up in Cooper, which is about 9-10 miles from St. Andrews. Over the course of the 3 years that Lees worked on this painting, he made over 30 sketches, seeking out most of the individuals who were represented in the painting, taking their likenesses, trying to capture a sense of their character, their personalities, which of course resulted in this very grand painting, 7 feet wide. It's painted on essentially the scale of a history painting from this period, and in which he has captured not only the four players and their caddies, but about 50 different spectators, all of whom are sort of riveted on the action. And since it's sometimes hard to understand how the pairs of players shake out, I'll point them out to you. One of the players is Sir David Baird, who's a man who is said to always have played in a top hat. That was remarkable. Feat in itself, his teammate is Sir Ralph Anstruther, who's in the red coat, sort of pulling back. Baird and Anstruther are playing this ball, which is on the right side of the hole. Their opponents are Sir Hugh Playfair, a man who would be the provost of the university for about 30 or 40 years, vital to the development of the modern town of St. Andrews. And he is playing with John Campbell of Glensadell, who's in this blue suit with a cigar, very, very confident that their ball, which has just been putted by Playfair, is going to go into the hole. One of the great ironies of this match is that we don't know who wins. The betting books for the Royal and Ancient Golf Club do not survive from these years, so we actually have no sense of the outcome, and we are, in a sense, in as much suspense as each of the 50 spectators who all turn their attention to the action in this picture. It is, of course, set on the links at St. Andrews, and quite as Timothy has mentioned, I was a student there for a number of years and actually spent, very often in the mornings, would run along the old course along the West Sands, and I'm always amused a little bit by this picture because there's not a hair out of place. It looks like a very calm day, and if any of you have been to St. Andrews, you know that the wind comes roaring off the North Sea, and it is in fact, I think one of the charms of this course is that it is very challenging. And sometimes in heavy winds, downright inhospitable to play golf here. Nevertheless, it is, of course, one of the great places and sites in which golf has been played. It's actually thought that golf may have been played as early as 1100 in Scotland. The first physical evidence that we get of golf in St. Andrews is about 1552, when with our student diaries recording students buying golf equipment. There's also notices that professors will be found in their office in the mornings, but on the afternoons, if you want to find them, they'll be on the course itself. You get a sense in this picture, as Lees has sort of given you the whole panorama of the town itself, and then you get the great sort of links land spread out around it. This is thought to have occurred on the fourth hole, which was often known as the ginger beer hole, where you could take a refreshment. And one of the details, which I find particularly charming in Lee's painting, is this young girl who's actually offering refreshments, probably ginger beer, to the various spectators. You'll notice that all of the gentlemen and even ladies who are watching the game are represented with tremendous care. They are actually all identifiable golfers and golf enthusiasts from the period. There's actually a number of publications that will can give you actual identifiable sort of names and sort of golfing histories, essentially, of each of these people. Which leads us to sort of question the motivation behind this picture. Charles Lees, prior to this moment, had been strictly a portrait painter. He was born in Cooper, just outside of St. Andrews. As a very young man, he trained with Sir Henry Rayburn, who was the preeminent portrait painter in Scotland in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. And then following his period with Rayburn, Lees, like most Scottish artists, spent a period of time in Rome. Scottish artists in this period did not study in London. They went directly to Italy. And then from there, Lees was engaged in a number of portraits until this moment. This is the first time he tackles a sporting subject. It's something he'll do again and again from the 1840s onwards. He did, for instance, a number of paintings of curling subjects, of skaters. And it's my suspicion with this that this picture was actually probably commissioned by a man named Alexander Hill, who was a very famous print seller in Edinburgh. Because Hill is the first person to own the picture, he bought it for £400, which is roughly the equivalent of about $40,000 today. So a very high price at the time. And what Hill does immediately after purchasing it is to have the work engraved. And we have a copy of the engraving in this exhibition. It's on actually the facing wall. And Hill sold hundreds of copies of the print. I think he quite sensibly recognized that there were at least 54 individuals here who would probably buy a copy, and many others who were interested in golf who would go on to purchase it. The size of the painting is linked to the engraving also starts to suggest something of the celebrity of golf in this period, and the fact that many of these individuals are quite noted figures. One of them that I'll point out to you is Alan Robertson, who was acting as a caddy here, but was himself a very prominent golfer. We have, very nicely, sitting behind Mr. Slevin, a sketch that Lees made of Alan Robertson. It was in preparation for this painting. That oil sketch is actually also closely linked to this carbon print that was made by David Octavius Hill and Robert Adamson, who were the two pioneer photographers in Scotland. Adamson was in fact a St. Andrews resident. They were engaged in a campaign of photographing St. Andrews about 1844, so pretty much at the moment that this match occurred, and the photograph records the placement and the sort of key postures of several of the people in the painting, suggesting that Lees probably had a copy of this photograph and used it when he was preparing the final painting. And as an added link, I will remind you, or tell you, that David Octavius Hill, one of the photographers of this work, was the brother of Alexander Hill, who produced, was the first owner and produced the engraving for this piece. Alongside the sketch of Hill, though, of Robertson, I'm sorry, we have one of Robertson's balls. And actually, maybe we could move over and look at the case of some of the golf equipment. Golf from about 1600 to 1850 was played using these feathery balls. And essentially what it is, it's three pieces of leather that were stitched together, leaving a very small hole, and then they took a gentleman's top hat and filled it with goose or chicken feathers. The feathers were sort of boiled and then stuffed when wet. Every single feather was stuffed into this little tiny ball. It was an extremely difficult task. They had sort of very long spears to do so. I think there were records of all kinds of accidents that occurred doing it. When the feathers dried, the ball hardened and it became quite a sort of solid and sort of perfectly, cut the leather properly, it would be a perfectly round ball, which is much preferable to the wooden balls which would be used prior to that date. The ball in the exhibition is actually marked Allen, so we feel fairly certain that it was done by Alan Robertson, who was really known as the best feathery ball maker in Scotland at this point. Robertson was himself a very significant golfer. He was said to have been entirely unbeaten when he played a match. He and his young apprentice above the fireplace, very sort of much loved in the history of golf, old Tom Morris. The two, Morris and Robertson, would often play together and were known as the Invincibles because they were never defeated in a match. Tom Morris was a St. Andrews resident who grew up, as I mentioned, he was an apprentice to Robertson. He was caught one day, he also helped Robertson make feathery balls. He was caught one day by Robertson playing with a new gutta percha ball, which is a ball made from the sort of a rubbery sap of a Malaysian tree. Robertson was outraged because the gutta percha ball was going to threaten their own livelihood with feathery balls. He immediately fired Morris right on the spot. Morris left St. Andrews, went to Prestwick, where he designed a very famous course there. He developed his own sort of ball and club manufacturing business. Was extraordinarily successful in that venture. He also would go on to win the British Open 4 times between 1861 and 67. When Robertson died in 1859, he came back to St. Andrews and was the greenskeeper for the Royal and Ancient Golf Club for about 39 years. This painting, done by a Scottish artist named Sir George Reed, was done on the eve of Morris's retirement in 1903. And I think captures us. He was known to be a very kindly gentleman, very dedicated to the sport, perhaps one of its sort of first professionals. And I think that sort of comes across nicely in this photograph where he seems to, his brown coat seems to almost blend in with his surroundings. I wanted to say a few words as well about this very unusual object. This is known as the Silver Club. It was a golfing trophy used by the Royal and Ancient Golf Club. The club itself, and as I said, the Golfing Society was founded in 1754. A group of 22 gentlemen from Fife. They were professors, noblemen, town leaders in St. Andrews, formed the first golfing society in St. Andrews. They were known as the Society of St. Andrews Golfers. And they essentially were formed to sort of create an annual competition for the Silver Club. So there would be an annual match. The winner of it would then win the Silver Club. It would be required to place to attach a new silver ball to the club, and then they would become the captain of golf for the year, which meant that they would arbitrate any disputes. They would sort of make sure that the greens were more or less in control and playable. This club was actually engraved on the foot of it, 1819, and the balls represent matches from 1818 all the way through to 1930. So it's a remarkable object. Interestingly, there is no ball from the 1840s, as you might suspect, that relates to our painting by Lee. So in every circumstance, we were sort of foiled by knowing who won that particular match. And I'll just draw your attention to a few other pieces in the exhibition. This is a painting by a different artist called Sir Francis Grant, who is also a Scottish-born portrait painter and painter of genre scenes. This is painted in the 1830s and commemorates the first game played in the North Berwick Golf Club. It was, and I'll just point out that Grant himself, the painter himself, was a member of the club and a very good significant golfer himself. The gentleman standing in the center in the white trousers, the blue coat, and the top hat is John Campbell of Glensidle. So the gentleman that we saw in the blue suit in Lee's painting is seen about 12 years earlier in the Grant picture. And Campbell was the first owner of this picture. I will mention that Grant, unlike Lee's, left Scotland and went to England, where he became a president of the Royal Academy. So he actually pursued much of his career in England, or in London in particular. I'd like to take you just outside this particular gallery to show you two other portraits